It's Hollywood Balls, me, Geordie, Pete Redding. Delighted to get my next guest. Been waiting a while, but that's through his busyness and my busyness as well. Before we start, though, and introduce him, I do have to ask you, if you could subscribe to our YouTube channel, just down behind our next guest, we would be very, very grateful. Okay, so on with the show. It's my great delight. 756 career games, a top defender, top defender. 27 goals, featured spells with Chelsea and Leicester, to name but a few. Welcome to Hollywood Balls, Frank Sinclair.
Thank you very much, Pete.
So I've got to ask you, Frank, before we get into your career and delve into, how it all came about, what have you been up to recently? Because you've been a busy man, I know that.
Yeah, so the turn of the year, I started going into Port Vale Football Club because of my relationship with Dave Kevin, who is the assistant manager at Port Vale, and he was my assistant manager for 3 years at Burnley. Obviously towards the end of my career, and always kept in touch with him. So I left the job as an assistant manager of a non-league side in January, and then I started going in from February all the way to the pandemic. And it was more for me just what I like to do in between coaching roles and jobs and stuff. I've always gone into football clubs and just seen how different clubs do things, and get a first-hand view of coaches at work and managers, picking their brains on why they do things in certain ways and stuff like that. So I was there for quite a while, and then after a while they started to give me a little bit of stuff to do with the first team. So first of all, I was working with the back four and doing bits and bobs with them, and then possession-based stuff. And I just got more stuff to do as I was going along. You earn that trust off of the coaching staff and the first team staff. And then before the pandemic, we was discussing maybe a role for me to come into the club. So, that materialized throughout the pandemic. And then the owners came to me and come with a role that they thought would benefit the club more than any. And that was working with the academy players and the players sort of like develop into the first team. So I've come in as a head of coaching development at Port Vale. It's a terrific opportunity for me to work with young players, which I've done at various clubs anyway. I've worked in academies before, and it's just putting my stamp on the whole curriculum at the football club and changing things and tweaking stuff and just trying to bridge that gap between first team and youth team football, which is always difficult to do anyway, but especially when you haven't got an under 21 and under 23 program at the moment. There's a massive gap between them. So it's just about getting those core values of the first team into the players. So if and when they do get that transition, they're a bit more equipped to cope with it.
And also, I mean, alongside that, you've pretty much realised a great new media career as well, haven't you?
Yeah, certainly. It was something that I went into sort of like towards the end of my career. I was lucky enough to have a good relationship with Chelsea Football Club. And, they always knew that I was a keen supporter of the club anyway. And then I got the opportunity to start working for Chelsea TV. We're going back probably 10 years now that I started at Chelsea TV, just doing the games that I could do while I was still playing. And I got a great experience and just an idea of what happens behind the scenes with media, working with TV and stuff like that. And I worked with some great people, Jason Cundy, Scott Minto before he went to Sky Sports, and Sam Matterface, who's obviously the face of international football with ITV now.
England last night he did, yeah?
Yeah, he done his first England game last night. So for me, I was around some great people in media, and I thought I was going to go down that avenue, as in seeking, to get qualifications in media and going that route. But sort of towards the end of my career, the coaching opportunities came up for me. I was still a player when I became a player manager. So it sort of like fell on my lap that way, with no experience of coaching whatsoever, but a job to do that I ended up doing for nearly 2 years at Colwyn Bay in the Conference North. And it was a great experience for myself.
Great stuff. We're going to delve back into that career now. You were West London district team when you were offered. I mean, you had several trials that I know from my research. But I bet that district team had some great players in it, didn't it?
It did, you know. Obviously, coming from London, for me, there's a whole load of talent within the London region. So the region was broken up into East, South, West, and North.
Yeah.
And I was born and bred in South London, but I actually went to school over the river in West London, Pimlico School. So that qualified me at any level I was playing football-wise. If it was connected to school, I had to play for West London, even though I was born in South. So that was something from the age of 11 that, you know, I met the likes of Eddie Newton, who was a young lad playing for Cardinal Vaughan. There was 2 or 3 other young professionals at professional clubs as well. Udo Onware, who became a really good friend of mine, who played for Fulham for many years and went on to play for Leyton Orient and Barnet and etc. and had a decent career himself. But there weren't many that come through that West London side. And obviously, when you played for West London, you had the opportunity to play for London as well, which was your greater district. And then you'd come up against the likes of Liverpool, Manchester, the Birmingham schools and all that sort of stuff. So the standard was very, very good. So I played for London from the age of 11 until I was 15 as well. Wow.
Chelsea, I mean, does it get any better than signing though for the team that you support? Does it bring extra pressure for you?
Yeah, no. For me, it was just the natural thing. I mean, when I was 11 years of age, I'd started supporting Chelsea from the age of 9, and that was purely by coincidence that we had a school trip as a 9-year-old, and they took us. They took all the players from school, but it was like specially picked. There was a handful of players that were specially picked from the school that got the opportunity to go and watch a Chelsea game. I remember I remember standing at the time in the old shed end and watching the game. And obviously, it was the first time I'd ever seen a crowd like that, and just watching the football and the atmosphere in that. And it was amazing to me because I always loved football. And I remember from a very young age always having a football in my hand, regardless of wherever I was going or whatever I was doing. You know, I'd be bouncing my ball, and the first opportunity I saw a wall that I could use, I'd be kicking my ball up against the wall and all sorts of stuff. So I was always into football. And then that just opened up a whole new idea of the game to me, just actually watching my first live game. So that's where I picked up on football. And it was a case of, I just watched all games, as many as I could from that age onwards. I wasn't really a Chelsea fan. I was more just a fan of the game. And then obviously, by the time I was 12, I was playing district football for London, and the scouts were very regularly at our games because basically you had the cream of London best-based players playing for this district team. And I got a trial offer off of Wimbledon, Arsenal, and Chelsea all in the same week. So I wasn't sure what to do. So the way it worked out was I went to Wimbledon on the Monday, I went to Arsenal on the Tuesday, and I went to Chelsea on the Thursday. And it was all organised for me to go down. I wasn't very impressed with Wimbledon. I think we trained in the back of a car park, which was behind Plough Lane, behind the stadium. So facilities wasn't great, and there was something about it that I just didn't enjoy. I went to Arsenal, which was an unbelievable setup, but I just didn't feel a part of the Arsenal one, because you go in on trial. I don't remember any of the coaches speaking to me. I just felt like I was just another number that had joined in. And there were some top players, you know, you could tell, even at that age, that you're amongst quality players. And I just didn't feel like I had the opportunity to impress when I went to the Arsenal one. And then when I went to the Chelsea one, it was just a different kettle of fish. Gwyn Williams, who obviously was the chief of the academy there, he just made me feel $1 million from the first day I walked into the club. Made me feel very special. You know, the facilities were great, and there were some good players there, and it just felt like home to me. So I don't think I even went back. I don't think I even contacted Wimbledon and Arsenal to say that I weren't coming back. It was just a case of I just focused totally on Chelsea, and from that age of 11, I went into Chelsea every Tuesday, Thursday, and played on Sundays for, you know, until I'd left school.
Brilliant. Now, Bobby Campbell gave you and other youngsters a start. Did you think that the manager was giving youth a chance, or was it a throw of the dice? Because he'd had a few defeats leading up to throwing you guys in, or do you think that he really believed that youth was the way forward?
No, well, I think the football club had a reputation of young players coming through anyway. So, you know, if you go back to 2 or 3 years older than me, there was the likes of Dave Lee, Jason Cundy, Gareth Hall, who obviously was a Welsh international, all breaking through. Damien Matthew, who was a midfield player, very talented midfield player, played for Charlton and other clubs after leaving Chelsea.
Yeah.
So it was visible that players were getting in the first team from a very young age. So it was something that I was never, I never thought that it wasn't possible. I thought to myself, if I worked hard and got my opportunity, I would make the first team. And I was very confident within my own ability as a young player anyway. The environment that we was in at Chelsea, you had to be confident, because if you didn't, you wouldn't survive. It was like a jungle. You know, the way that we trained, the standard of training, the standard of the players, you had to be top drawer just to survive that environment. So that gave you confidence that if and when you got the opportunity, you knew you was in and around and learning from some of the best coaches and obviously playing with some of the best players in the capital. So I was very confident. You know, the year before me, there was the likes of Graham Lasso, Graham Stewart, Craig Burley, and players like that. That was the same. Craig Burley was the same scholar age as me, but he was a year older than me at school. And so we could see that there was a pathway for the players. So I wasn't surprised that I was going to get an opportunity. It was just about when and making sure that I was ready for it.
Funnily enough, as well, I lived in London for a short time. As you know, as you can see, a massive Newcastle fan, which all the listeners know. But I always remember with Chelsea that I first saw them 80s. They were in the second division. They had Kerry Dixon, Pat Nevin. It was David Speedy, just a great side. And they came to St James's Park, and I remember because they took the whole of the away end. There was about 6,000 that day, and Terry McDermott was playing for Newcastle, and Chelsea went into a lead. I think they were top of the table at the time, and I just always remember having this affinity afterwards from being a young boy. I was mesmerised by the Chelsea fans, how loud they were, how great the team was, Kerry Dixon and David Speedy, and it was a 1-1 draw that day. But I've always just thought, and I've been to Stamford Bridge since, there's just something special about Chelsea, isn't there?
Yeah, there certainly is. And, you know, for me as a youngster growing up, I thought all clubs were like that because obviously from the age of sort of like 13, I started doing the ball boying. What it was when you was a schoolboy and you were signed to the club, you had the privileges of coming to the games and being a ball boy on a Saturday afternoon. So I was right amongst it, you know, pitch side. Basically, you could hear the fans, you could hear the atmosphere, and for me that was brilliant for preparation for what I was gonna hopefully go into, because you know you wouldn't be sort of like a fox in headlights when you did get to that opportunity, because from the age of 13, 14, you was right amongst it. Okay, you weren't playing, but you were in the thick of things, being touched. Yeah, being right.
Do you ever fancy a quick throw in?
Yeah, yeah. Tempted a few times to boot a ball that was going somewhere, but no. Obviously, you know, we had rules to stick by. When Chelsea were winning, slow down going to get the balls. When we were losing, speed up, get the balls back in as quick as possible. So we were part of the tactical part of the game as well, which was an understanding that you were taken on board without even realising, really. But the atmosphere at the football club was unbelievable. I guess when you go to Stamford Bridge and most of the clubs around the country now, I guess we've lost that atmosphere because of, you know, behind the corporate side of the game now. You've kind of lost those core fans that have kind of been priced out of the game, really, which is a shame, because for me, the supporters, the atmosphere, that's what football's all about. That's why you want to play the game in the first place.
Yeah. Exactly. Now I'm going to ask you, Great question for me. And you came up against famed referee Paul Alcock of Paolo Di Canio fame. You were wrongly punished for a clash of heads with him. If we'd had VAR then, surely it would have been cleared up quickly and then there wouldn't have been a ban for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, going on loan to West Brom was part of my development. I was only 18 years of age, got thrown in at the deep end because West Brom was in a relegation battle. Bobby Gould was the manager. When I was told about the opportunity to go there, to be honest with you, I didn't want to go because I really thought I was close to the first team. You know, there was the likes of Tom Boyd, who was a Scottish international, who was playing at left back at the time. And for the last 2 years, I'd played left back in the reserves. And because of my own inner beliefs and confidence, I thought I was better than him. So I didn't want to go because I was thinking I'm one chance away from getting the opportunity to challenge this Scottish international for his place in the team. So I was a bit disappointed about having to go, but then I understood, you know, I had to prove myself in senior football because it's totally different to the performances I was putting in reserve team football. You can still question whether someone's ready or not. So I understood that part of it, and I thought to myself, okay, well, if I'm going to go for 3 months, go there, get the experience of playing in front of big crowds. Because even though West Brom were in the old third division at the time, they were still playing in front of like 30,000 and stuff like that at home. So it was an incredibly supported club. So yes, this opportunity, I think it was Exeter away, if I remember rightly, was the game. And we're winning 1-0 in a massive game that we need to win. And the referee, Alcock, as you says, he gives a penalty against us. And it was just never a penalty in the last minute of the game as well. So, you know, the penalty had nothing to do with me, but obviously just the adrenaline and being in the moment. Yeah, exactly. I just went over to remonstrate with him. So I ran towards him where he was standing sort of like mid-pitch after he'd given the penalty outside the box. I ran towards him to remonstrate with him, and he's not seen me coming towards him, and he went to run to the touchline away from the players. And as he turned to run to the touchline, he just ran straight into me. Obviously, I'm a bigger lad than he was, and he bounced off me and fell on the floor, and I was like, oh. I kind of saw the funny side of it, but it's only an accident. So I went to pick him up. As I pulled him back up and that, he's got up and he says, "You've headbutted me." So I was like, what you on about? And he went, "No, you've deliberately headbutted me." And I was just like, wow. So he sent me off as well as giving the penalty away. And then when we went in the change room, Bobby Gould said to me what happened. So I told him, and he was like, okay, well, we'll see what comes of it. And then it wasn't until a couple of days later as I start opening the newspapers and seeing young Chelsea players should be banned for life and all stuff like that. And as an 18-year-old, that was tough to deal with because, luckily the club were brilliant with the way they supported me, as in West Brom and Chelsea. They supported me all the way to the FA hearing. Yeah. We used the video evidence, which we thought would obviously help us because you could see exactly what happens. There's no way a headbutt. It's just a clash, which was accidental between us. And, the FA chose to go with the referee's, his idea of what happened.
There's a shock.
Disappointing. Yeah, exactly. And I was pre-warned about that anyway. So I kind of knew I was up against it, but to get, I think it was a 9-match ban, a small fine and 9-match ban was hard to take. But I suppose the good thing that came out of it, after my 9-match ban, I got my opportunity to play at Chelsea.
And stayed out the way of the refs. Moving on swiftly from that. At Leicester, you played under a couple of different gaffers. How did Peter Taylor's style differ from, say, that to Harry Bassett?
Well, first of all, obviously, the person that brought me to the football club was Martin O'Neill. Yeah. Again, another situation where I was very surprised that I was leaving the club. At Chelsea, I'd spent 8 years in and around the first team, played a lot of games. Obviously, my most successful 2 years at the club coincided with me leaving. We won the FA Cup in '97. We won the League Cup and the Cup Winners' Cup in '98, and we started to buy some top players. Marcel Desailly came to the club, Laudrup came to the club, Albert Ferrer we signed, Spanish international. So I thought the club was going in a massive direction to being successful. And, you know, obviously I'd felt a part of the beginning of it. And then that summer, my agent rings me and tells me that Chelsea have accepted a bid off of Leicester City for a lot of money. They want to recruit some money back for the players that they've spent money on. And I was devastated, to be honest. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, because I was just
to interrupt you there, Frank. Sorry, just for the fans. So your agent calls you, so you hear nothing from the club itself, the people that you deal with on a daily basis. It comes from your agent, right?
Yeah, that's right. And, you know, it's mostly how things are done. The first person port of call will normally be the agent. You may often get a manager may pull you aside, but we was actually on pre-season tour, and this was deep into pre-season as well. I played every game in pre-season and was building up quite a good relationship with Marcel Desailly at centre half, and I was thinking, cool, we could be really good. My pace, his experience, you know, he was physical, and we both were, and I was thinking what a partnership this could be, and was really looking forward to challenging other players, the likes of Michael Dubry and younger players like that, for a place in the team, because we're all starting to establish ourselves. And Frank Leboeuf, obviously a World Cup winner, along with Marcel Desailly. So there was competition for places, but I still felt that I had a real chance of being in the starting team for Chelsea to start the new season. And then, like I said, we was on the pre-season tour. It was the last pre-season tour before we came back, and it was about a week to 10 days before the season started. So we was in Holland, and my agent rang me and told me about it and said, when you get back, we're going to have to sort it out. So I tried to speak to Vialli while I was there, and he claimed that he didn't know anything about it.
Wow.
So we got back, Vialli spoke to Ken Bates, and then Vialli came back to me, and he kind of gave me the ultimatum of, if you want to stay, I'm for you staying, but going forward, I can see you only playing a bit part as in a squad member. And at the age of 26, I thought I was coming into my prime, and the last thing I wanted to do was start being a squad member of a top club. I'd rather go somewhere where I felt wanted. And I suppose the disappointment of the rejection really hurt as well, which I suppose made my mind up. You know, I didn't even want to know the interest of any other clubs that might be interested in me, because when I met up Martin O'Neill, he made me feel $1 million straight away. He sat me down. We met in a hotel on the M1, and he sat me in the hotel, and him and John Robertson, who obviously a Nottingham Forest legend, sat together. And as I came in, they both stood up, shook my hand, and both looked at each other and says, "Can you believe he's here?" Do you know what I mean? To talk to us, which made me feel $1 million straight away. So we sat down, and he said to me, apart from Tony Adams and Steve Bold, you're the best centre half in the Premier League. So when he said that to me, he had me straight away. You know, we didn't discuss any finances, anything like that. All he done was he spoke to me about how important my role would be playing for Leicester City, and went through the team and how we played and etc. And before you knew it, I started visualizing myself being in his team. So he almost sold the club to me without even offering me a financial package. Before, you know, I was shaking his hand. It wasn't until I left I started thinking to myself, well, how much am I actually going to be earning? You know, which is obviously important. But when you grow up in football and you get to do what your childhood dreams are, the money is secondary to obviously getting the opportunity to play the game. So it wasn't the most important thing for me, but obviously it was a good enough package for me to go to Leicester City as the most expensive signing they'd had at the time. And it made me feel a little bit better, but you know, deep down, I was a little bit heartbroken at the same time, because all I'd ever known was Chelsea from the age of 11 years of age.
And your team as well.
Yeah, exactly. So it was tough to take, but you know, you have to have the thick skin in this game, because there's a lot of changes at any time in football for players, and you have to be able to galvanise yourself and have that resilience to keep on playing, because there's a lot of disappointments as well as, you know, the high moments in football.
I mean, obviously, you had a great time at Leicester, and your career evolved. And I've watched you live. I've watched you on TV. Always wished that the Toon had such a defender as yourself. Probably still do. You could probably still do a job if I'm honest. But you did go to Burnley, and my Burnley question for you is: you were partnered with a young Gary Cahill at the back. Now, you were coming on in your career then. Do you think that Gary Cahill maybe looked at you and treated you as a mentor?
Yes, he does say so, to be honest.
Yeah.
I've always kept in touch with Gary Cahill from those times, and it was incredible for him to go to my club, eventually ending up at Chelsea himself. But when he first came to Burnley on loan from Aston Villa, he got thrown in right at the deep end as a player that had never played senior football before. His first game was the 4th round against Liverpool in the FA Cup. Wow. And he got thrown. He literally trained with us the day before. We got him on loan. He trained with us the day before and got thrown straight into a game where I was playing centre-half at the time with John McGreal, who was a terrific player. John was. And the gaffer brought Gary Cahill in, moved me to right back, and stuck Gary Cahill in between me and John McGreal because he had experience both sides of it. So I wouldn't take the full credit for getting Gary Cahill through that game, because he had great information from John McGreal and myself as well. And he was, from the off, you could tell, he was quick, he was massive, good size, 6'3", 6'4" at the time. Obviously, he needed some filling out to do, but he still had enough about him that he coped with such a game, such an atmosphere as his first game, and he had a terrific debut. And we ended up beating Liverpool 1-0 that day, and I was obviously captain of the club, and it was a very proud moment for me in such, one of the biggest nights in Burnley's history. And as soon as that game finished, I'd done a few interviews. And I said at the time, if anything is to go by tonight, this lad will play a lot of Premier League games and probably play for England. And, I was sure enough proven right, because he's had a great career, Gary. And, I was able to keep a relationship going with him because he learned so much off of being at Burnley before he went to Bolton and started his career properly. There was a situation where he had spoken, that a big learning curve of his was his time at Burnley and playing with the likes of myself and John McGreal at the time, who were experienced defenders who helped him, to start his career.
Great stuff. Moving from the domestic game to a bit of international, I've got to ask you about it. You played in all of Jamaica's games in the '98 World Cup finals, basically rubbing shoulders with legends of the game, Batistuta, the one and only Diego Simone. It's every boy's dream, right, to play in the World Cup finals?
Oh, absolutely. I think growing up as a young player, the things that stick out that you always remember is watching the World Cups, watching the FA Cup finals, and watching Match of the Day. Those are the three things that you remember as a kid. And if your childhood dream is to be able to perform on all those stages, and for the amount of people that have that dream and the amount of people that actually achieve it, it's a small percentage. And obviously the opportunity to play in the World Cup for me was something that was a difficult one, because I'm still 26. I've obviously I'm still at Chelsea. I've obviously had 2 great seasons. And I'm thinking, with the right opportunity, I may get a chance to play for England, which is obviously where I'm born and bred. But, when I looked at it, I just thought to myself, am I ever going to get an opportunity like this again to play in the World Cup? I spoke to my family about it, and they were massively a massive influence for me, because obviously it made my mum and the rest of my family, my uncles, my brothers, sisters, and everybody like that, it made them so proud that I would represent the country of our motherland. So, that made my mind up as well about making the opportunity, or because the choice was turn down the World Cup and hope that I get an opportunity to play for England. So it was a bit of a gamble, and I obviously thought, you know, would I ever get this opportunity again? So I decided to roll the dice and go with it. You know, when I looked at the players that were leaving the English Premier League to join the Jamaican national side,
decent
I thought it was
side as well,
credible.
right?
Yeah, I thought it was very credible. The likes of Marcus Gale, who was playing for Wimbledon in the Premier League, Robbie Earle, who was playing for Wimbledon in the Premier League. We had the likes of Darryl Powell, who was playing for Derby, Dion Burton, Derby in the Premier League. And I was told about the talent that was in Jamaica and how much us joining the team would help these players progress and help them, you know, further their careers. And then, you know, off the back of it, you had the likes of Ricardo Gardner playing for 10 years at Bolton after the World Cup and stuff like that. Ricardo Fuller playing for Stoke City in the Premier League, and Preston, etc., being a top goal scorer. All these type of players, they may not have got the opportunity to get to Europe if they didn't have the credibility of some of the English Premier League-based players coming to join the Jamaican team. So I felt a touch of responsibility with that as well. But it was something that I'll never forget, a great experience. It's not many players can say that they've played, you know, 3 games in a World Cup, all 3 group stage games. And obviously you get to tell your grandchildren that one day, and it made me very proud. And the way we got treated in Jamaica was unbelievable. We were like a group of David Beckham when we went back to Jamaica. The way we were treated, the way we were greeted at the airport and stuff like that before games, it was an incredible experience.
Rightly treated as heroes. Now, you've done a lot with show races and the red card, and it's imperative in today's world, now more than ever, really, that everybody promotes this message. What do you think's needed now, currently, as we stand, in your opinion, to keep this going?
I think the solidarity is there. Obviously, when you touch on show races and the red card, I've been doing that from my early 20s with a man who you probably come across, Jed Greby, another very proud Geordie man. And Jed's a good friend of mine, and I've helped him for over 20 odd years to establish show races and the red card, and someone who I totally respect. But it has been difficult for him at times, because of the backing, I would say, of the FA and the PFA. I always think there could be more done. I think if you're going to take racism seriously, there has to be an equality within the game at the higher levels. When you look at boardroom levels throughout all the leagues and obviously the associations as well. I think if you're going to take racism seriously, it has to be shared with Black or Indian or whatever type of coaches to get equality, so that decisions that are made are more educated decisions. And that's all I'll say on it, really. I think there's a lot of work to do. Obviously, from the days that I first started playing the game, there's been a hell of a lot of improvements, but I still think there's always more to do.
There's a long way to go. Finally, I'm going to ask you to put your pundit hat on, if you would, Frank. We know it was Liverpool's last year. We know it's crazy scores. It's like playing in the park with me and my friends currently, 6-1 here, 7-2 there. And I think that is probably something to do with the fans not being there, in my opinion. But two parts of this question. Can Liverpool go on and dominate? And how strong a challenge can your club, Chelsea, make to the Premiership this year?
Well, first of all, I'll touch on what you said about the goals and stuff first. I don't actually think it's because of the fans. I think it's because of the rules. When you look at the new rules in the game, it favours attacking players so much now. The referee's decisions favour attacking players. You look at how many penalties that are happening in every game now. All the decision making is favouring attacking play, which I don't mind. It just makes it a lot more difficult for defenders. You see the style of how defenders are defending now with their hands behind their back. It's the last thing you'd coach a young kid to do, because you lose your balance. You can't change direction. So how are you meant to defend with your hands behind your back, but you're scared that you're going to give penalties away for handball? So I think the goals that are coming out now is totally because of the rule changes. Okay. But going back to Liverpool, I think it's very difficult to dominate in this time, in this era, with the money that's available to clubs to improve and try and bridge the gap between the best teams. You know, if you're a top 6 side in this country, I think you'll always have the finances to improve your side and bridge the gap between your Liverpools and Man Cities. It's just about managers doing it right. When you look at the money that Frank Lampard, for example, has spent this summer, I think it's been terrific. The signings that he's made has certainly improved Chelsea's team. I think it will take him a little while to settle down because, you know, unfortunately, 2 or 3 of the signings that he made, they weren't quite match fit or match ready to go straight into Chelsea's team. So they've had to build that. But once they do get a settled side, I certainly think Chelsea will be up amongst Man City, Liverpool, also Tottenham this season as well. I think Tottenham signed very well. And obviously you look at the way that Everton are playing under a terrific manager in Ancelotti. Yeah. I think it's very difficult to dominate the top level in England because so many good teams that are able put in a run together that can challenge. So Liverpool's obviously going to be the team to target. But I think it certainly won't be a 1 or 2 horse race this year. I think 3 or 4 teams will be right to the end of it.
Do you think there could be a surprise in there, given the circumstances that you've just said that we're under? You know, like the likes of Everton are playing well, and Chelsea, when they bet in, could do, and it's just not a normal football season, isn't it? So there could be the opportunity for, like, one of your old clubs, Leicester, to come up and surprise someone.
Yeah, there's always that element. You look at Sheffield United last season; they came with a surprise element, and it took teams a long time to work out, you know, how to combat how well that Chris Wilder had his team set up. So there's always that surprise element. When you look at Everton, I suppose they are the surprise package right now for how well they've started. Can they maintain that? With a man like Ancelotti, I would say absolutely, because when you look at what I've seen him do at Chelsea and stuff, he's relentless with his work, and he's relentless on the training ground and getting things. He's a perfectionist. So I can see Everton being, you know, right amongst it as well. Not surprised by that. They've signed some terrific players as well to improve that squad. So that's why I say, I think, you know, when you look at the top 6 to 8 teams, they can all beat each other on their day, and especially, like you've touched on, Pete, with the scenario of the environment at the minute with no fans. I think it is a little bit of a leveler, as in results wise.
Well, it is the tuner and the quarter-final of the cup, and they're 6th in the league, so it's got to be a leveler. Frank Sinclair, we thank you so much for chatting with Hollywood Balls. All we ask is that you come back on later in the season. We catch up with what you're doing personally with Port Vale, and we'll have a later chat. Ladies and gentlemen, Frank Sinclair.
No, thank you for having me. It's been terrific.